And I believe 6ix9ine, when he gave guys 20 years in jail. All the guys he was with, oh, but he fucked my wife. Oh, but he did. That means nothing. There's a man that works in a bodega that never been a criminal in his life, see some shit, and he won't tell. It's in your character whether you're going to tell or you're not going to tell. So 6ix9ine was telling. He was hanging out with these cops before they even went. Like he was telling, the drivers telling on him. Everybody's telling on each other, right?
They say in hip hop, loyalty is everything. But what happens when the ones preaching loyalty are the ones hiding behind it? For years, Fat Joe's been seen as a gatekeeper, an OG who claims to stand on honor, code, and the rules of the streets. But now 6ix9ine is flipping that image upside down. In one explosive moment on the Danza Project, he didn't just clap back, he exposed decades of hypocrisy, calling out Fat Joe for preaching morals he allegedly doesn't live by. And to make it worse, he dragged one of hip-hop's most sacred names into the crossfire, Big Pun. Because if there's one thing that hits harder than betrayal in hip-hop, it's family. We're diving deep, not just into the beef between Fat Joe and 6ix9ine, but into something way bigger. Who really gets to define integrity in this culture? And if the no snitching code is so sacred, why do so many break it in silence? Stay locked in. By the end of this, you might start to see both Fat Joe and 6ix9ine in a completely different light.
If I crown myself the rat leader, he crowned himself as the cap leader.
There's a lot of people that say he ain't lying.
He ain't lying? Yeah. Alright, if Fat Joe is not lying, the next person on the Danza Project, bring Big Pun's son. Bring Big Pun's son. Watch when he see this clip, he gonna hit up, yo, Chris, don't do that. How much money you need?
It all started with a simple interview, but what came out of it felt like an earthquake in hip-hop. When 6ix9ine pulled up to the Danza Project, nobody expected him to sit quietly. This wasn't a man looking for peace or forgiveness. This was a man ready to air it all out, name by name, bar by bar. The moment Fat Joe's name came up, 6ix9ine's energy shifted. He leaned in, looked dead at the camera, and dropped one of the most disrespectful yet revealing clapbacks we've seen in a while. "If I crown myself the rat leader," he said, then Fat Joe crowned himself the cap leader. He wasn't joking either. 6ix9ine accused Fat Joe of lying to the public for years, acting like a street legend while allegedly ignoring the very rules he claims to stand on. But here's the part that really got people talking. 6ix9ine didn't come with empty words. He came with receipts and old wounds that never healed. Because when he mentioned Big Pun's family, the entire room went silent. Even the host looked uncomfortable. It wasn't just gossip anymore. This was history, reputation, and legacy all colliding in real time. And what made it hit harder? He wasn't entirely wrong. For years, quiet rumors have circulated that Fat Joe didn't properly take care of Big Pun's estate, leaving Pun's wife and kids struggling while he moved on with his career. It's a topic that's always been whispered about, but never spoken with this kind of energy. So when 6ix9ine brought it up, it felt like he was opening a vault of truths that hip-hop wasn't ready to face. Because if Joe's built his reputation on loyalty and realness, what does it mean if the people closest to him, Pun's own family, have a different story to tell? And here's where it gets deeper. Was this really about street code, or was this about selective morality? The kind where loyalty only applies when it's convenient? That's the real question. Before we talk about 6ix9ine's clapback, we have to understand why it hit so hard. Because Fat Joe isn't just any rapper. He's one of hip-hop's self-proclaimed gatekeepers of loyalty. For decades, Joe has stood on one message: real ones don't snitch. He said it in interviews, podcasts, and social media posts. From Drink Champs to My Expert Opinion, Fat Joe has made it clear he wants to be seen as a man who protects the old school code, the unwritten law that silence equals honor. So when 6ix9ine took the stand years ago, Joe wasn't just critical, he was furious. He called 6ix9ine a rat, a disgrace to hip-hop. And even went as far as to say, that boy's miserable in his body. He can't even look at himself in the mirror. In one interview, Joe even claimed he warned 6ix9ine before it all went down. He said he told him straight up, "Oh, you keep playing gangster, you're gonna end up behind bars or worse." But here's where things start to twist, because over time, Joe's stance stopped sounding like advice and started feeling personal. Every podcast, every panel, every radio show, Joe couldn't resist bringing up 6ix9ine's name even when the topic had nothing to do with him. He went from being a wise OG speaking on street principles to what many fans now call a preacher with selective memory, because Joe's entire image, the loyal brother, the street certified legend, starts to crack when you put it next to the stories that 6ix9ine dug up, the ones involving Big Pun, loyalty, and how the so-called code didn't seem to apply when money and legacy were on the line. And that's what makes 6ix9ine's attack sting. He didn't just question Joe's words, he questioned his character. So before you pick a side, ask yourself this: if loyalty is the foundation of Joe's identity, what happens if that foundation isn't as solid as he says it is? But 6ix9ine didn't stop there. He started unpacking receipts. He accused Joe of being a master of lies, claiming he's been hiding behind a fake image for years. He called him out for preaching loyalty while allegedly turning his back on those closest to him. "Bring Big Pun's son to the Danza Project," 6ix9ine said confidently. "Watch how fast Joe calls him, offering money just to keep quiet." The crowd went quiet because that wasn't a random diss. That was a direct hit to Joe's legacy. See, 6ix9ine knew exactly where to strike. He wasn't arguing about street codes or rat talk anymore. He was exposing hypocrisy, pulling the mask off a man who for decades claimed to represent the real ones. And whether you like him or not, 6ix9ine's logic landed a punch that the internet couldn't ignore, because in his words, don't talk about morals when you've got skeletons in your own closet. Think about it. In a culture obsessed with credibility, what happens when the self-proclaimed gatekeeper of integrity gets accused of betraying his own? That's when the conversation stopped being about snitching and started being about who's really telling the truth. Because anyone who knows hip-hop knows Big Pun wasn't just another artist. He was a pioneer, a Bronx legend, the man who opened doors for Latin rappers worldwide. And most importantly, he was Fat Joe's brother in every sense but blood. After Pun's tragic passing in 2000, everyone assumed Joe, the man who discovered him, mentored him, and came up with him, would look after Pun's family. But according to Liza Rios, Pun's widow, that's not what happened. For years, she claimed that Joe withheld money that rightfully belonged to Pun's estate. We're talking royalties, publishing checks, and performance payouts, the kind of income meant to make sure Pun's family never struggled. Joe, of course, denied those claims. He once said, "We got her $1 million. I even wrote her a check out of my own pocket." But Liza called that a lie. She filed a lawsuit accusing him of mishandling her late husband's earnings, saying checks were being collected behind the scenes while the family saw nothing. And here's where it gets deep. The case did go to court. Legal filings showed Joe's team tried to dismiss it, not by denying the money existed, but by arguing Liza didn't have the right to sue. That's when fans started asking, if you really took care of the family, why all the technical defenses? Even recently, Liza's legal reps revealed new findings: foreign royalties, unclaimed earnings, and misreported splits that might show someone else pocketed Pun's money. So when 6ix9ine brought up Big Pun's family, it wasn't some wild accusation, it was a strategic strike, hitting Joe where it hurt the most, his reputation for loyalty. And the question lingered in everyone's mind: if Fat Joe couldn't honor the code with his brother, how can he stand as hip-hop's voice of integrity? Because let's be real, breaking a street code is one thing, but breaking a brotherhood, that's a wound that never heals. The moment 6ix9ine's clip hit the internet, the comment sections exploded. Half the crowd was cheering, saying he's finally exposing the hypocrisy. The other half, they were ready to defend Fat Joe like he was untouchable. Social media turned into a digital battleground. Twitter threads, YouTube reactions, TikTok stitches, all dissecting what 6ix9ine said. And the wild part, even people who couldn't stand 6ix9ine were forced to admit he kinda had a point. For years, Joe has been the self-proclaimed gatekeeper of morals in hip-hop, the guy who lectures about loyalty, authenticity, and respect for the culture. But the Big Pun situation made people question whether those words actually matched his actions. One viral comment summed it up perfectly: if 6ix9ine is a rat, then Fat Joe might be a snake. And while that sounds harsh, it reflected how people felt. Because for a lot of fans, this wasn't about who snitched, it was about who pretends to be real when they're not. You had old school hip hop heads defending Joe, saying things like, "You youngins don't understand. Loyalty means everything." But the new generation, they weren't buying it. They saw it differently. To them, loyalty doesn't mean silence, it means accountability. They started digging up clips of Joe dismissing younger rappers, clowning people like 6ix9ine for chasing clout while simultaneously keeping his own name trending by mentioning him over and over. It's ironic. The same man who says 6ix9ine thrives off attention keeps giving him attention. And that's when people began asking the bigger question, is Fat Joe protecting hip-hop or just protecting his image? Because while Joe frames his feud with 6ix9ine as about morals and codes, a lot of fans are starting to think it's about something else entirely. Control. It's the classic clash between the old guard and the new wave. The OGs built the system, but the new generation doesn't feel like they owe it blind loyalty anymore. 6ix9ine may be chaotic, unpredictable, and controversial, but when he called out Fat Joe, he tapped into a real shift in the culture. People aren't looking for perfect anymore, they're looking for honest. And that's the one thing 6ix9ine just gave them. This is where it gets deep, because underneath all the name calling, the real argument isn't just Fat Joe versus 6ix9ine, it's old hip hop versus new reality. For decades, the no snitching code was sacred. It wasn't just a street rule, it was a badge of loyalty, a survival code born from environments where silence literally meant staying alive. But fast forward to 2025, and that code doesn't carry the same weight for most of the audience anymore. As 6ix9ine himself once said, "Y'all want me to be real to people who weren't real to me." And that hit hard because it forced a new generation to ask, what's the point of loyalty when loyalty only goes one way? Fat Joe sees 6ix9ine as the embodiment of everything wrong with modern rap, the clout chasing, the trolling, the chaos. But 6ix9ine's fans, they see him as someone who flipped the system. He didn't play by the rules, he exposed how crooked those rules were in the first place. That's why this clash is so fascinating. It's not just a feud, it's a cultural mirror. Fat Joe stands for the era of codes, crews, and silence. 6ix9ine represents transparency, rebellion, and exposure, even when it gets messy. And here's the twist, both sides have a point. Yes, 6ix9ine's actions broke street codes, but Joe's constant preaching about morality while being tied up in lawsuits over loyalty and money makes people question how much moral authority anyone in the game really has. It's like watching two worlds collide. The world of integrity versus the world of influence. And in today's hip hop, influence seems to be winning. Because now the internet is the new street. You don't need the block's approval, you need the algorithms. You don't need silence to survive, you need engagement to stay relevant. That's the evolution Fat Joe refuses to acknowledge, and the exact system 6ix9ine knows how to exploit. And as wild as it sounds, maybe that's what makes both of them necessary. One reminds the culture where it came from, the other exposes where it's going. So the question is, who's right? Is the code outdated? Or is it the only thing still holding hip-hop together? Because in a world that thrives on clicks, leaks, and confessions, what does loyalty even mean anymore? Fat Joe's generation came up in a world where snitching meant exile, where your word was your bond, and breaking the code could end your career or worse. But 6ix9ine's world, it's fueled by the internet, where narratives shift overnight, and morality competes with virality. He's not afraid to turn the camera back on the culture itself, saying, if I'm a rat, then y'all built the maze. Because think about it, 6ix9ine didn't just snitch, he exposed an entire industry addicted to drama, judgment, and double standards. He's showing that in today's world, integrity doesn't trend, conflict does. And in a time where fans are more likely to scroll for chaos than truth, maybe he's just giving them what they've been asking for all along. Meanwhile, Fat Joe represents something fading. That era where OGs were gatekeepers of ethics, not algorithms, but his constant crusade against 6ix9ine feels like a man trying to hold on to a rule book that the next generation stopped reading, because today the audience doesn't care who followed the code, they care who's entertaining, who's fearless, and who's real in their eyes, not by street standards. And maybe that's the scariest part for the old guard. Realizing that the culture they built no longer belongs to them, that the same streets they once ruled have been replaced by comment sections, live streams, and viral moments that decide careers faster than any DJ ever could. Still, there's a haunting irony here. Both Fat Joe and 6ix9ine are fighting for something deeper than pride. They're fighting for authenticity in a world that can't seem to agree on what that even means anymore. For Joe, it's about legacy, proving he's still a moral compass in a chaotic industry. For 6ix9ine, it's about rebellion, proving that the system's hypocrisy is the real enemy, not him. And maybe that's why people can't look away, because their feud isn't just about two rappers, it's a mirror held up to hip-hop itself. A reflection of where it's been, where it's going, and who gets to define what real even is. So here's the question for you. When the code, the culture, and the clout all collide, which one do you think wins? At the end of the day, this whole Fat Joe and 6ix9ine situation goes way beyond a beef. It's a cultural crossroads, one that forces everyone watching to pick a side, or at least ask themselves what loyalty really means in today's world. Fat Joe stands tall on the side of the old code. No snitching, no shortcuts, and no compromising the streets that built you. He's the voice of an era where integrity was everything, where your name meant more than fame, and breaking the rules meant you couldn't come back. But 6ix9ine, he's the face of the new code, if you can even call it that. He's proof that controversy can outweigh credibility, that exposure has replaced silence, and that in the internet age, truth isn't sacred. It's strategic. He flipped the narrative. He turned judgment into content. And whether you love him or hate him, you can't deny that he's rewriting the rule book that Fat Joe built his career on. Maybe that's why this feud hit so deep, because it's not just a clash of egos, it's a generational shift playing out in real time. The old guard says, honor the code. The new wave says, own your story. And somewhere in between, the culture is evolving, redefining what it means to be real. But here's the kicker. When you strip away the noise, both men are reflections of the same truth. That power, fame, and survival come with choices, and every choice has a cost. So maybe it's not about who's right or wrong. Maybe it's about who's honest enough to live with what they've done, on camera, in public, and forever in history. And that brings us to the real question. Is hip-hop's code still sacred, or has the internet finally rewritten it for good? Because in the war between reputation and relevance, only one gets to survive. Drop your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you made it to the end of the video, you're a real one. Go ahead and make it official, and like and subscribe.